Well, good afternoon, everyone. The H1B Guy here, and today, the H1B Guy Live, discussing H1B lottery alternatives with Marc Pavlopoulos, CEO of Syndesus. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube and like this video so that I can continue to produce more content like this for you. I also wanted to mention that H1B Guy offers a variety of consulting services. I help businesses and individuals solve complex work authorization issues in the recruitment process while bringing awareness to employment-based immigration benefits. If I can help you, please reach out. I'd love to hear how. And today's live stream is brought to you by Syndesus, the ideal plan B for high-skilled immigrants currently located in the U.S. whose status may be uncertain. If you're facing an H1B denial or OPT expiration, don't get caught off guard. Make sure you have a plan B, and Syndesus is your answer. They'll gladly help you navigate the process, and if you'd like to find out if you qualify, please be sure to use the link in the video description below, and someone from Syndesus will be in touch. Well, Marc, today is the 6th time, I believe, now that you've been on the platform. It's hard to believe.
Yes.
I know we first met back in 2021, and it's so funny, Marc, that in our 3 years of doing this, we're still talking about the same thing, and we're still talking about the same thing because not a lot's changed in the world of high-skilled immigration for tech pros here in the U.S. And I've been a part of and witnessed Syndesus's consistent and organic growth, and really excited to talk about a lot of the things that have been going on in the world of Syndesus. So, Marc, glad to have you back on here today, a little after 2 p.m. Eastern on March the 27th.
Yeah, happy to be here. Appreciate being back on the show to see how we can help people out.
Awesome. So, Marc, I think the hottest topic of the week, of course, we're about 50 hours now removed from the H1B lottery for fiscal year 2025 closing for registrations, which was on Monday, the 25th at noon, after an extension that was announced late last week. And Marc, in preparation for this, you were really curious about what was I hearing in terms of overall demand for the lottery, and I think I wanted to jump into a lot of the things that I've been hearing and talk about what that means for folks that potentially have failed lottery attempts. So I've been hearing a lot of similarity to last year in terms of the overall demand. And what I mean by that really is that the overall demand last year, if we look at unique registrations, Marc, was somewhere around 350,000. And so I've been hearing, and I've been talking about this for a few months now, and that is, I was expecting it to be somewhere around 325,000 unique registrations. So that's one individual that's registered in the lottery. Of course, as I've talked about a lot, Marc, and I know I mentioned this to you, but the biggest change for the lottery this year is that USCIS has gone to what they call a beneficiary-centric approach. Are you familiar with this, Marc?
No, love to hear more details about that.
Yeah, so what they've decided to do, because of the massive amount of duplicate registrations, which were multiple employers registering the same individual that happened for the previous 3 years, this year they decided to take a beneficiary-centric approach, and that really means one passport or one travel document, one shot, okay? So the passport number or the travel document is the unique identifier. Individuals still could have multiple employers register them, okay? I could register, you could register, Marc, but the individual only is going in for one shot. And so this has changed now to give the employee a little bit of control, and that they can decide who they want to work for, right? Best offer, best location, best job, occupation, and responsibilities for their skill set, right? So That's the biggest change for this year. And so a lot of individuals and a lot of what we were hearing was that we're expecting the overall registration numbers to be a lot lower, Mark, based on this. Well, and
Okay.
everything that I've been hearing and from actual demand, it's really going to be very similar. Of course, we won't have final numbers until the end of April, Mark.
Okay.
But what that leads into is probability. And if we look at 85,000 total H1B visas made available, and let's say, there's 300,000, 325,000 plus registrations, we're still in that 25% probability of selection. And that's a 1 in 4 shot, Mark. And I think that leads to a lot of individuals who are on OPTs, high tech international professionals that are looking to get to the US, seeking alternatives. And I know we've talked about this a lot on the platform, but I think it still comes back to how Syndesus can help individuals that may be facing a failed lottery attempt, may have an upcoming OPT that's expiring before the next lottery can come around. So I'm curious what's changed in terms of what you've been seeing and demand for folks that are really targeting a plan B for the H1B lottery.
I think in terms of what it's almost like what's changed, it hasn't. It is a continuation of the same, as you said. Like we're here every year.
Mm-hmm.
We're here for the third H1B lottery in a row, but the same thing is going to happen because you just put those numbers out there. There's going to be a number of people in the tens of thousands who will hit third try, and this will be the last try, and they'll be waiting for response, and that waiting will stretch on and they won't hear it, which means they know they weren't chosen. So it is a unfortunate continual event every year of, and then then there's two parties here. There's the company, and then there's the individual. Both have a lot to lose, but it becomes the same thing of, okay, now what? And that's where Syndesus provides the plan B. But I think when you suggest what changes, I was thinking about when you mentioned last year, there's so many people, multiple applications.
Yeah, 750,000, Mark, right? That 750,000.
And you can see why people would do it. Either you can see why it's happening. It's because the system isn't working, and it's been 85,000 for decades. And it's like, well, can we get creative and try something else? But at the end of the day, it's like the system. It's what is, and it hasn't changed in decades. So unfortunately, it delivers the same results. A lot of people who are going to get delivered bad news that they didn't get picked.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and we'll get to some Q&A and address some of the comments that are already flowing in here into the chat, Mark. But I've talked about this for the better part of a few weeks, and I thought that notifications would start going out as early as this past Saturday, the 24th. But what happened is there were some system outages. So late last week, USCIS announced that they were going to extend the deadline through this past Monday. And so based on that extension, I was expecting notifications of selection to start going out as soon as today through Friday. And looks like there's some circulation of potentially selections already started and notifications are already starting to be received. And so, that falls right in line with the timeline that we've talked about a lot on this channel, Mark, and that is April 1st, this coming up Monday, is the beginning of the application period for those individuals selected. And USCIS will give a 90-day window, right, through June 30th of 2024. And my guess is if there's 325,000 registrations, my guess is USCIS probably is going to select somewhere around 95 to 100,000 individuals, expecting an 80+% application rate for this year, just based on those changes. So that still leaves, Mark, 200,000 plus folks seeking alternatives. And if I were to, make a really unsubstantiated claim, very unscientifically, I'd guess 50% of those individuals are here in the US. So that's probably 100,000 plus here in the US. And my guess is it's probably somewhere around 75,000 plus that are international, meaning not located currently in the U.S. And one of the things that you and I have been talking about, where Syndesus has seen a lot of interest, is in this high skilled international interest for individuals that are seeking other options outside of not only the H1B. But I know we talked about L1, L1A, L1B options and the time frame that it takes to go through that and the approval process and the expenses associated. So what I'm curious about from you is, what do you think has been sparking a lot of this international interest and looking at relocating an employee to North America, specifically Canada in this case, and the importance of the time zones and the benefit for the employer? What do you think has been creating this really interest over the last year or so?
Yeah, it's something we've also noticed. So I'll give you a few use cases that we've seen. So there are companies, time zone does matter. One use case we're seeing is a company has an office in the US, they have an office in India, and they're coming to us saying, Syndesus, we need your help to sponsor a Canadian work visa. And our first thought is, but why? Like clarify. You have great American immigration lawyers. You're fully capable of. They're going to give you. You have L1 options. You have transfer options. So the new use case popping up is they're saying, okay, Mark, we're bringing someone to North America, but we're not moving the entire team. We're moving our highest producer. We're moving the person who has to work closely with the U.S. team. Or the new use case we're seeing is, we want to retain our talent in India. To retain them, we're offering them a perk. We're offering them something very special. Or we want to offer them special. We cannot offer them a U.S. green card. We cannot offer them U.S. citizenship. That's not possible. But some of them have done the research and they'll come to us and they'll say, we understand that if Syndesus sponsors a Canadian work visa, the worker's going to get permanent residence in 18 to 24 months. And they ask, is that correct? And we're like, that's correct. And they're like, okay, compare that to a U.S. green card. 20 years, 40 years, 80 years. And we're like,
150.
150? Exactly. Yeah. And then they say, and correct us if we're wrong, but then from when the person arrives in Canada, if PR is 18 to 24 months, citizenship is about 4 years, 4.5. And we're like, in Canada, we're like, yes. And they said, we're offering that to our best people to retain them. Because if we leave them in India, they could get bid up and taken away by a competitor. But here's the ultimate perk: citizenship and an anchor in North America. I'm like, okay, Canada wins. There is no U.S. option. L1 doesn't matter because you bring someone in. The idea isn't they come in and then somehow they move to the beginning of the green card line. We all know they don't. So we're like, there's one interest of companies saying we have external offices. The U.S. isn't an option. We'll put them in time zone directly above their office in the U.S. I'm like, that use case makes sense. The follow-on one then is a company that says, look, we've seen this moving someone from mainland China, again, moving from someone from India, other places in the world, and they'll say, look, it's too complicated to bring them into the U.S. But if we had them sitting in Canada right north of our U.S. office, time zone matters. We don't want this person coding or working while we're asleep. They're part of our team. And that's where you hear the distinction more coming up of, okay, Mark, low cost development takes place in our overseas office. That will not change. But not everyone is on a low cost development cycle. There are engineering roles, there are data scientist roles where you want them on the same time, on the same call with the US team, not overlapping for 1 hour, on exactly working the same hours. And we can't get them to the US. Canadian immigration makes it easy to put them just north of the border.
And what does the timeline look like if it's U.S. versus international? Is it still the same? Are we still looking at, approximately as early as 4 weeks, but maybe closer to that 6 to 8 week mark from initiation of the application?
Yeah, there were some COVID, the COVID hangover, if you call it, from immigration slowing down. There used to be long lines. Work visas used to stretch. It's to be on the. I always like to be conservative. It's in the 8-week range, and it might be slightly different if you're outside the U.S. It used to be drastically different. Now it's similar. From start to finish, the Canadian work visa process that we've seen for Global Talent Stream, Canada's tech visa, is around 8 weeks start to finish.
So from initiation of kind of the application to approval and when an individual could be physically present in Canada right now is approximately 8 weeks from with using Syndesus.
Yes.
I'm curious on the GTS, and I know you've answered this before, but I always like to clarify. If I have a spouse and I'm entering Canada on GTS, does my spouse get work authorization as part of my application?
Yes. Thankfully, there are no changes to report. The Canadian system has been the same since GTS was launched over 5 years ago. Canadian immigration figured out, I think what we in the U.S. haven't figured out is if you're bringing a skilled immigrant in and their partner, spouse also has the ability to work, there should be no restriction on them. It's to the benefit of the Canadian economy. It is to the benefit of the immigrant coming in that both can work. So unlike in the US where there's H4 challenges, Canada automatically gives an open work permit to the spouse or partner of anyone who has the Global Talent Stream work permit, which now allows for dual income. Good point.
Yeah, that's a huge, significant difference when we look at GTS versus being in the U.S. on H1B, right? There is no work authorization for the spouse of an H1B unless they've gone a little further down the green card path. I'm also curious. Last time we were on, you and I, we talked about the H1B open work permit, and it was like 10,000 that they were offering, right? Which is a very minimal, and it created a lot of interest and media coverage, and instantly received the 10,000 applications and 24 to 48 hours. And I'm just curious, has that had any impact on Syndesus at all? Have you seen any impact from that?
And I think you put it well. It was a bit of a stunt because it was 10,000, not 50 or 100,000.
Right.
And yeah, I think the goal of it, they won. From a Canadian viewpoint, you have someone who's basically on an H1B and laid off. You have 60 days to find another sponsor or you leave. That person's like, oh, but if I went to Canada and I could just live there, I'm not going to get kicked out. Still have to show funds to live, etc. But it did get a bunch of people that would show up there to work. In terms of how it worked for Syndesus, our specialty is we're a Canadian company. We have permission to sponsor Canadian work visas, but our clients are all in the U.S. The companies who use us are moving people OPT expired up. So there's the scenario where that could have worked is the person in the U.S. has the H1, one of those 10,000 people that went to Canada. What might have I think I froze for a second.
Nope, you're good. I got you.
So I think what an angle that might have worked is the clever way that person could have used Syndesus is, of the 10,000, they go to Canada and maybe look at some of the Canadian jobs. And they're like, American jobs pay more. So then if they went to an American employer and said, okay, look, I'm in Canada, I'm just across the border. I'm a UCLA grad, I'm a University of Texas grad, I'm a Berkeley grad, I have a US degree, I have US work experience. Can you hire me? And I don't need work authorization, but I still need an employer record service, which Syndesus does. So we could still actually help employ them in Canada working remotely for a US company.
Yeah. So enter in under the H1B OWP, but still could go to work for Syndesus as a full-time employee, supporting their previous U.S.-based employer if that was an option. Yeah, I think that's an interesting benefit to that open application, right? Is that Syndesus can still employ as an EOR, right, in Canada, and can still partner with your previous U.S. employer if they wanted to maintain your services, remotely
Yeah,
from Canada. It's a great point, and I think that's probably a benefit when we look back in our conversation. That was 6 months ago. We probably didn't anticipate would be an option for Syndesus and for individuals that were seeking that H1 OWP. I wanted to get into how this works in the easiest way for individuals to get in touch with you guys. I know I have links in the video description below, and it'll take you right to a landing page where you can fill out a form, and someone from Syndesus will be in touch. But if you're here in the US, and you're needing to consider other options, I see some folks that are mentioning it's their last chance of the lottery for this year. Or even if you're outside of the US, right? Like we talked about, working for an international employer that maybe has operations in the US and India, or operations in the Philippines and US, depending on it being tech, right? That's the biggest thing, is that it has to be tech.
exactly.
But maybe they don't have operations in Canada. That's kind of the target demographics as we've seen the expansion in your services. I think the biggest takeaway for me, Mark, in our conversations, and we've talked about this, is yes, there are employers that reach out to you all of the time and want to understand, is this something that's possible for my current employee? But more times than not, it is the worker, the employee, that's initiating this conversation. And so I wanted to have you spend a few minutes of time talking about, outside of going and hitting the application, the landing page, and filling out, the form that we have that's in the job description below. What are other ways that the worker can initiate this conversation, not only with Syndesus but with their employer?
Yeah, you're touching on, Rob, a challenge that we find a lot of the workers have, and this is
Mm-hmm.
and anyone who's been on an H1B in the U.S. probably can relate. It's the concept of, you feel like you're in this precarious position. What we hear is, we over the years we've talked to a lot of workers who've been in the U.S. trying to win the lottery. That
Mm-hmm.
worker in that situation is probably not running to their boss saying, "I'm due for a 50 grand raise. Hey, look, I've been doing some amazing work. Let's bump my, I want to petition for a raise, bonuses, etc." Most
Mm-hmm.
workers in the situation, their demeanor is, okay, I'm not going to rock the boat. I just need to win the lottery. I just need to get my work visa secured. I cannot be asking my U.S. employer for favors or extras. I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be doing this. And we
Mm-hmm.
hear that from a lot of people, and we understand it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's a concept where we're like, why not? Like, why wouldn't you ask for a raise if you're due? It's more of a thought of, no, I just need the work visa to go through. I don't want to distract my employer. And we understand it, but we also talk to the employers. And I'll give you an
Mm-hmm.
example. There was a couple years back, someone we moved to Canada. I had the chief financial officer on the phone, and this is a call that I took.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the chief financial officer says, "Mark, we have a person who lost the H1B lottery. I'm like, what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
What are your company planning on doing?" He's like, "Mark, we're going to terminate her. It's awful, but we
Mm-hmm.
can't employ someone multiple time zones away. When OPT is expired, that's when the job ends. She
Mm-hmm.
will return to her home country. We know we don't want to lose this person, but there's no other choice." And then I'm talking to your company, you tell me there is another choice. So I walk him through how it would work.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point he's like, "This makes sense. You're going to allow me to
Mm-hmm.
keep this person." And
Mm-hmm.
I said, you know our tagline? It's like, same job, same U.S. boss, same laptop, same time zone, same U.S. company, just working remotely from Canada, via Syndesus, via
Yep.
we'll sponsor the work visa and employer of record.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, and then he's like, "Okay, well, let's get to the cost." He's like, "Let's get to the cost, Mark." He's like, "I'm a financial officer. He's like, this is right up my alley." I'm like,
Right.
"Exactly." And
Yeah.
I shared with him, time how much it cost. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh." And I think it was like, it was an all in number, for example, like 15,000. He's like, "Oh, wow."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Okay." He's like, he says, "I don't know about that, Mark." And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay, I have one question for you. what were you going to spend to replace this worker? Because you just told me 5 minutes ago you're going to terminate her and you're going to advertise the position, you're going to hire someone again. And he made this easy. He's like, hold on a second, Mark. He had an intercom on his desk. He hits a button. He's like, let me call HR. Let's find out. And he's like, what's the cost to replace? He's like, what was the budget to replace this worker and you hear this person come over the intercom, and she's like, we were going to spend a minimum of $15,000 recruiting fees to replace the worker.
Yeah.
And you see him kind of like just put his head down for a second, and he's like, thank you very much. And he turns the intercom off. He's like, I said, you were going to spend this to get someone new, who didn't know how to do the job, who's new to your company, who doesn't have the year's worth of knowledge, who may or may not work out. And for actually less money, I was giving you the opportunity to retain this amazing person. In 60 days they'd be in Canada. He's like, I get it. Let's move forward. And that conversation, Rob, you and I know it. We've heard it. You've dealt on the recruiting side.
Yes.
But the unfortunate part is the worker doesn't realize that the company has spent over $20,000 in U.S. immigration fees to keep them. We'll spend $10,000 more with lawyers to get them a green card that may take decades. And the replacement cost we hear is $50,000 to $75,000. So when we talk to HR execs, they're like, Mark, this Syndesus is a bargain. You're going to help us keep the same person for a fraction of that. The challenge is the worker never gets to hear those numbers. All they think of is, I have to ask my employer to pay an amount to Syndesus to keep me. They don't realize that number is trivial compared to the cost of losing them. And that's the tough part of this. So what we always do, to answer your question in a shorter way, is we'll say, have the call with us. We're going to walk through how this works with you one-on-one so you feel comfortable. And then let's get your manager on a call. You join that call too. But when we talk about this, we're going to ask them the question of, what's the replacement cost of the worker? And you're going to hear your own manager say $50,000 to $75,000 and lost productivity. And we don't know if the new worker's as good as you. They may make mistakes and they get terminated. Maybe they're the wrong fit. You're going to hear all this complication. And then you're going to hear the company saying it's much lower cost to keep you and use Syndesus and just move you across the border.
It's really interesting, Mark, when you put it that way, because depending on if they're having to use internal recruiting, external recruiting, the compensation is always in flux, right? To recruit the person who maybe has the same or similar experience from an equity perspective may cost the organization more. Recruiting fees, job posting fees, and then you mentioned all of the immigration and filing fees, right? So when you start to add those things up, I mean, tens of thousands of dollars, right? And so I think it becomes one of those things where, and I know you guys work very closely and counsel with the individuals on how to approach their employer, but do that confidently with the mindset of saying, you're going to your work visa authorization is going to expire, and it's going to expire in 60, 90, 120 days. And you're proactively giving your employer an alternative for a failed lottery, an alternative for an OPT expiration. And that is a solutions-oriented conversation that I think what I have found in my conversations more often than not, to your point, Mark, the employer goes, oh, that's an option? How much is it? Right? So it's a really great point, and one that I'm glad we got to hit on here today. I did want to mention, Mark and I are going to be rolling into some of the questions and comments in the chat. If you have other questions or comments, please feel free to go ahead and drop those in there. We definitely are going to get through a quick Q&A here in just a couple of minutes. Mark, I know you just shared a recent success story, but I think one of the things when we talked earlier in the week that I was really excited to hear is the repeat clients that you're experiencing now in Syndesus. And I think that's a testament to your process and kind of overall the benefit that your organization provides to U.S. employers and international employers as well. And so it kind of goes back to how we started the chat. Not much has changed, but you're seeing repeat business now in clients because not much has changed. So, um,
Yeah.
I'm going to put a link here. So here is the link. Of course, you can grab that from the chat. It's also in the video description. This will take you directly to a landing page for Syndesus. So please feel free to use that link if you're interested in finding out more, talking with someone from Syndesus directly. I wanted to, Mark, just kind of start off with really at the top, and I'm just going to roll through these. So, kind of as I alluded to earlier, says selection process has started, which I think this is really interesting because I was looking just in a news alert that was posted yesterday, Mark, on USCIS.gov, and it stated that the initial registration period did close on Monday, and that they will be soon, very soon, randomly selecting enough unique beneficiaries of properly submitted registrations projected as needed to reach the fiscal year 2025 H1B numerical allocations, and that they'd be notifying the petitioners and beneficiaries very soon. So, that was posted yesterday, and it sounds like, kind of based on what we're hearing here, that says lots of approvals this year. So as we talked about earlier, Mark, I said probably about 100,000 or so to reach that federally mandated 85,000. Maybe the number's a little bit higher. I haven't seen anything official. So here's a question about I think somebody who is currently on a B2, Mark, that potentially lost their H1B visa. So my guess is that this is probably an H1B that's experienced a layoff. Unfortunately, the way Syndesus currently works is it's really employer driven. And I know that, and there's a question about Path to Canada a little further down, but I know that you've had a recruiting arm of Syndesus called Path to Canada, where you've helped folks that potentially are looking for new opportunities in Canada. But for the sake of what Syndesus does, and serving as an employer of record, and relocating your job to Canada, and then contracting you back to your U.S. employer, that would not be the case here in Monday Cooking's situation. So Fat Master asks, are the results out? Are they still processing? I'm uncertain. I don't have any claims here. So Sanjay says last chance, Mark, right? And he also said, as you were talking about, he posted a comment when you were talking about how difficult it is for individuals to approach their employer. He mentioned that's true, right? That comment came in as you were really hitting in on. This has to be worker initiated more times than not. 9 out of 10 times it is worker initiated, and so you've got to get past the fact of, you are going to ask your employer to pay a fee, right? But the cost of them losing you is $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. So here's a good one, Mark, and I think this gives us an opportunity to maybe just give a little update on what's going on with Path to Canada. See that most Path to Canada job postings are for IT, computer science. Is there demand in Canada for civil, mechanical, or electrical engineering candidates?
There is. The challenge is so Path to Canada, the idea basically was a marketplace. It's to connect someone. It has nothing to do with Syndesus. So someone who goes to Path to Canada, if someone comes to Syndesus, their situation is, I have a U.S. job.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get picked third term in the lottery. OPT is expiring.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to lose that job. I'm about to have to leave the U.S., go back to home country. I'm facing basically the worst case scenario. Could Syndesus help get me a Canadian work visa and move me across the border? Yes. There's another larger group of people saying, I got laid off. There is no OPT. There is no U.S. employer. I just need a tech job. And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard in the U.S. Can I get a tech job in Canada? So yes, Path to Canada is a marketplace. We do have some jobs available there.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, when I see you in Atlanta in a couple months, I'm going to share with you. I'm going to relaunch Path to Canada. I'm going to do something a lot bigger. I'm going to refocus it a bit. So we'll talk about that in detail. And maybe we can talk it through on the show in summer.
Yeah.
But to answer this person's question, we've only been dealing with tech jobs because that's the ones that work with that are aligned with the Canadian Work Visa Global Talent Stream. We haven't worked with employers around civil, mechanical, electrical engineering. Those aren't the kind of companies we work with. It doesn't mean we couldn't. It just means at this point we haven't. There's probably an opportunity down the road, but I don't want to give false hope.
Yeah, but I think one good point to make here, Mark, is that I believe it was last year where they did update the categories for the global talent stream to include some of the civil, mechanical, and electrical. There was like a mining engineer or something along those lines, if I remember some of the categories that were increased. And Mark, you don't know this, but the RRH has been a longtime supporter here on my platform, and so just really appreciative of having them jump in here on today's live stream and just for their continued support. Mark, they're a great supporter of what we do here on the platform, and just wanted to make sure to give them a call out there. Nikhil asks, currently on STEM, 1.5 years of OPT left. My current employer would not move me to remote. How long is the job search process and immigration process if I want to move to Canada? So really this comes down to, is express entry an option for this individual, Mark? When we look at, the quarterly drawings, is it better? Are they better off identifying another employer that would be willing to add them to work remotely? Or is this a situation where, identify a Canadian employer who wants to bring them on? Because I think if we look at what Syndesus does, the employer has to be part of the equation here. And so for Nikhil, what do you think his best options are?
And I'll start off with a disclaimer. I'm not a Canadian immigration lawyer, so I'm offering some feedback on what I've heard recently. So you're right. If let's talk about express entry for a second, because that is express entry is basically a skilled worker. There's no job. You're not moving your job from the U.S. You don't have a job in Canada yet. You want to move to Canada as a skilled worker, and as you fill all the paperwork, the goal of it is to get as part of a permanent residence draw. It's a points-based system. Anyone who follows it's watching the points creep up in Canada. So people are saying, hey, wait a minute, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would have had enough to get in. Points are given for language skills, number of degrees. You get points added for age, and then they get deducted for age at a certain point. So, for example, people are just saying, I want to get into Canada. Express entry is getting more difficult, unfortunately. Yeah. So I was in Toronto a couple of weeks back, and an immigration lawyer I've worked with for a long time. We were having a conversation about this, and he says, Mark, the best way still, especially with the points going up, is coming into Canada with a job. So he's like, Mark, when you move someone in, let's talk about like people whose OPT expired, they can't stay in the U.S., and Syndesus takes them from the U.S. and pops them across the border. From a Canadian immigration perspective, even during COVID, the Canadian government said, okay, you want to come in for permanent residence? Hold on, don't come in yet. Things are bad. The entire time during COVID, the border remained open for people who had work visas. It may have taken longer. You may have had to do that very unpleasant COVID test, but we moved people across the border and they got in because that was considered essential to the Canadian government, the Canadian economy. So one interesting thing is you get a global talent stream work visa, you get the work visa, 50 points show up towards permanent residence because you have a approved job offer in Canada. Each year you work in Canada, you get more points. So the immigration strategy that we would recommend is, it's getting harder by going express entry, but if either you have to move your U.S. job to Canada and Syndesus helps you, your express entry points skyrocket. So when I'm having, I often me and my team meet the people we've moved across the border. We're asking them, we moved you across, what was your path to permanent residence? Some of them are like 12 months, 14 months. Yeah. And we're like, whoa, we say 24. And they're like, well, Mark, you're being conservative. We got it faster. But they got in with the job offer. So that becomes the angle of, and this is
they're in a full-time employment, right? And generally a tech occupation. And so, the points right then and there, when you start to look at how a merit-based system works with point values for certain categories, having full-time employment in Canada, that sounds like point value approximately, and that's significantly weighted. And so I think, to me, then the best advice for Nikhil is, if you can't get an H1B through your current employer, you may want to start targeting employers who would allow you to work remotely in Canada and understand that you working for them for the next year and a half here in the U.S. would provide value to them at a future state if they needed to relocate your occupation. So, some intricacies to that question, but I think some good advice. So, Mark, I think this is a good one for us to work on closing out. Do you think they'll increase the H1B cap on the H1B lottery at some point ever?
As an American citizen, I would love to see us fix the challenges around H1B.
Mm-hmm.
Make it merit, not lottery based. There's a whole bunch of changes I would make.
Yeah.
But my personal opinion, I don't see any big changes coming in the political environment in the U.S.
Yeah.
I see them getting maybe worse, but I don't see them changing and getting better like I wish they would.
Yeah.
And that's and Rob, I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but that's why when asked that question, for me, it's I'm an American citizen. I want things to be good here, but I also lived in Canada 5 years on work visas and student visas.
Yep.
And I have a company that's based in Canada, and I help people move there.
That's right.
I know their immigration system's very different, and it's very beneficial. And I meet the people we've moved up over the years, and they're happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm happy for you to have me on the show as a plan B to say, look, when bad news is delivered by the U.S. and it is for many people, April's going to be a very unpleasant month.
Yeah.
Maybe we can help.
Yeah. My short answer is, will they ever? I think ever is a definitive term, and I think there's always a possibility for there to be an increase. I don't foresee that, kind of as you mentioned, anytime in the foreseeable future. If they were to increase the overall cap, I think that they would probably go to increasing that advanced degree and most likely assigning those increased H1s to individuals that already were in a full-time role with a U.S. employer working on an OPT or OPT STEM. I think there's a line and a gap there where you're allowing 200,000 international students to come into the U.S. and get U.S. educated, but yet you only have 20,000 H1Bs for those graduates every year, right? And so I think at some point you'll see folks that are working in a full-time occupation potentially have a clearer path to the H1B, maybe even in a different lottery pool or outside the lottery altogether. Mark, one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. If H1 is picked, do they check background of any employment or look for only U.S. employment? If the U.S., do they still require to put any experience in the resume? And that answer is yes. They will check your credentials, but if you've only worked in India, that'll be part of your resume. So pretty straightforward there. Is it 100% lottery, or do they actually review some of the cases? They're referring to the random selection here, Mark, and it's absolutely it's a randomized number selection based on the overall candidate pool. So, Mark, we had a great turnout today. Very clearly coming off the heels of the H1B lottery wrapping up on Monday, and sounds like as we went live here today, individuals were being notified of selection, which is really cool, Mark. The timing couldn't have been any better on that. That's just it's fate or coincidence or both, I guess. But I love what you and your team have going on at Syndesus. A very much a boutique type service that you offer as an employer of record. If you are a high-tech professional living and working in the U.S. and you're facing H1B, failed lottery, OPT expiration, as you like to say, same employer, same employee, same laptop, same time zone, just remotely from Canada. And I think that's really well said and a great way to put it. And I think that if you are someone who's going to get bad news today and needing to know what your plan B is, please use that link in the video description below. Reach out to Mark and his team. And I know they'd love to get a conversation started with you guys. For everyone who posted in the chat here, Vapav, Sagar, Sanjay, RRH, Nikhil, Sid, Deepak, Fatmaster. Thank you guys for joining us here today. Again, I'm going to have to go out when we log off here today and see if I can see where this information potentially is coming from. That the lottery is completed and selection notifications have gone out. Mark, before I close this out, anything that you want to add?
Just a quick thought. I'm thinking of when we meet every year when I'm in Atlanta and talk about. I always come up a list of questions on the H1B lottery, strategy, experience, and you always have a wealth of knowledge. So I'm appreciative. I learn something every conversation we have. And as you would say, that's why you have this show. You have a lot of information to share. I'm happy you have me on here and Syndesus just to say when things don't work, having a plan B. When OPTs, when you get the bad news this year, Syndesus definitely has a way to help. So I'm appreciative that you have me on to share this information. You have you have a lot of knowledge to share, and I always learn when I talk to you. So thank you for having me on today.
Well, I really appreciate that, and it's mutual, right? You're the expert when we talk about relocating to Canada, specifically for tech pros living and working in the U.S. But also, again, there's a whole rest of world out there outside of the U.S. that has tech pros living and working in countries around the globe where time zones are important, and getting an H1B or getting an L1 may not be an option. And I think it's a great point and an entirely not new demographic, but I think one that's organically grown based out of necessity, Mark. And just wanted to remind everyone of that. And I think it's a great point that we talked about that today, because we really haven't gotten into that one a whole lot in your previous times here on the channel. So with that being said, just wanted to remind everyone that today's live stream was brought to you by Syndesus, the ideal plan B for high school immigrants currently located in the U.S. If you're facing an H1B denial or OPT expiration, don't get caught off guard. Make sure you have a plan B, and Syndesus is your answer. They'll gladly help you navigate the process, and if you'd like to find out if you qualify, please be sure to use the link in the video description below, and someone from Syndesus will be in touch. Also like to thank our partners, PERM Ads and Mob Squad. Please follow Mark on LinkedIn. He's also on Twitter, not as active, but he's extremely active and a great follow on LinkedIn. Syndesus Co. Syndesus Co. on LinkedIn. On Twitter, on Instagram. So please go ahead and make sure that you're following Syndesus so that you're kept up to date with the latest that's happening within their organization. Just wanted to ask you again, if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications so that you're notified anytime we go live, like we did here today on March the 27th, a little after 2 p.m. Eastern. For Mark, my good friend Mark at Syndesus, I'm Robert. I'm the H1B guy. Mark, we'll have you back on maybe September, August, okay? We'll plan something maybe six months from now to have you back on as we kind of turn over the fiscal year. But again, I'm Robert. Follow me on Twitter at the H1B guy, Instagram, Facebook. Robert Bouchard on LinkedIn. Please send me a connection. I'd love to get connected with you there. The H1B guy.